Prescott. Another edition of Prescott Talks here. Today we have Mr. Doug Dolan. He is an ambassador for MATForce. He's going to speak to us today about some of the things that are going on within our community as an ambassador to MATForce, and also some of the addiction and problems that we have. I would also like to remind you all that we do have Lynn Lemaster, our editor-in-chief, at the keyboard. So if you do have a question for Doug or myself, or want to make a statement, by all means, go ahead and type that question in, and we will always answer your question to the best of our ability. So with that, good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Glenn. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks.
So I wanted to start off just a little bit about you, where you've been, how, what you've done, and basically, I know that you've done a lot for our community as well. So I want to bring that up as well.
Sure, thank you. Yeah. So, addiction is something that is very personal to me. I'm in recovery myself. I was blessed. I was raised in a really good family, and sometimes people question, who does addiction happen to? And addiction doesn't care. I mean, addiction has no prejudice whatsoever. So I was raised in a really good family. A lot of discipline, a lot of love, a lot of structure. My dad was originally military. My parents are devout Catholics. Yeah. I went to Catholic schools my whole life, and went to a Jesuit all-boys college prep high school, and I just started drinking when I was 14 years old. And I was a binge drinker, blackout drinker from the get-go, from the very first time. And so then at 15 is when I started smoking marijuana. At 16 is when I started doing nitrous oxide, and later on, cocaine. And but pretty much predominantly, I was a binge drinking alcoholic. It's kind of evolved into where I was starting to get arrested, drunk in public. I was waking up in jail, having no idea why I was there. Ended up in padded cells, had police helicopters on me, and surrounded by squad cars. And it's like, how did this good altar boy end up with this kind of life?
What happened?
Yeah, what happened exactly? And so, I just got to a point where I was desperate. I wanted to get sober, but I couldn't stop on my own. And I tried for about a year and a half, stopping on my own. It wasn't working. And I got to a point also where I could not look at myself in the mirror for the last year of my drinking. I was so crawling out of my skin and detested with who I had become that I couldn't even look at myself. And yet I was getting promoted in my job. I was very good at hiding it. And then it culminated in, I got a DUI on a company trip. I totaled the car into a street pole with 4 other employees in the car. So now the secret's out. But I was so good at hiding it that when the police talked to my VP at that time and told him what had happened, my VP started arguing with the police, saying it can't possibly be Doug. He's my most responsible guy. And yet it was me. And so I did get into a treatment program, started going to AA, and God bless, I've been sober for 21 years. And so now I own an addiction treatment center. I'm co-owners with my partner Albert Black in Recovery in the Pines, and also Spartan Recovery. And we've been doing Recovery in the Pines for about 7 years now, and Spartan for about 2. And, like I said, addiction doesn't care. It'll grab anybody. We've seen anywhere from the 18-year-old kid who has absolutely no life skills whatsoever, all the way through people in their 60s, and some people who own businesses or at other, as VPs or other high-level positions and things of that nature. We just see a tremendous cross-section. And then I was blessed to be able to sit on a committee with you that you were chairman for. So Prescott has been a top 10 recovery destination in the nation. And it wasn't that long ago that we had kind of a mess of a situation here in our little Mayberry town. And so there was upwards of anywhere estimated from 150 to 250 sober living homes in town. The community was sick of it because many of them were poorly run, or not managed at all. And so Mayor Oberg fortunately had the wisdom to, try to step up what Noah Campbell had set in motion as HB 2107 to get greater oversight on the structured sober living homes there. So we sat on that committee together, and I think by the time that you and I left the committee, I believe we were down to about 40 sober living homes at that time. So there was a pretty significant reduction. And, I lost a younger brother to an OD. I've lost some other close friends. So again, like I said, this is just, for me, this is a calling.
Yeah.
Because I've done a number of other things. I've owned other businesses. I was a VP for a computer memory company for a period of time. But for me, this is a calling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So, just very grateful, very blessed.
Yeah, well, it was great working with you on the ad hoc committee. I remember Mayor Oberg says, "Hey, there's this guy named Doug Dolan." I didn't know who you were.
Yeah, we met in a Starbucks.
We went to Starbucks, which I don't admit very often going to Starbucks. Yeah. But anyway, I went to Starbucks and we had a cup of coffee, and I mean, it didn't take long. I went, "Wow, this guy got to be part of our committee." And you added a lot to our committee as far as the questions that you had asked a lot of the professionals and the insurance companies. I think we did actually, at the end of our tour, went down to 30 sober homes. But those were 30 sober homes that had an ordinance and had some structure. And
That's right.
And they actually had some, they were taking care of the patients or the clients, as you call them, that had problems. They weren't just dropping them out in front of a coffee shop or a gym and letting them run, wild within the community. So, that was a sobering time, to say the least, because just like you, many people may not know, I lost my son at 22. And, it's been, we moved from California to Prescott, and I thought, and I retired, and I thought I was going to go fishing and, having a good time. And, God had other plans for us. And we've gone through, from the Sober Home Committee to MATForce, and that's kind of where we're at today for Jill and I, my wife, and we want to talk a little bit about MATForce and what the mission is with MATForce, because I think even though you and I kind of understand the recovery process, I really think the key is not doing it to begin with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and teaching our kids and telling them that, it's not okay to do these things, go out and drink and smoke marijuana and do this other stuff.
Right.
And I know they're going to test it. They always do. I mean, that's just kids. But the more we warn them, I'll let you take over from there, Doug. How do you feel? How does a parent go to a child and say, because I did it,
Yeah, so did I.
I mean, I just kept on saying, look, I never see, look at the athletes, look at the people in the world. Do you ever see anybody get ahead that are on some kind of a drug, be it alcohol, marijuana, or whatever else? So,
some people will say, yes, they get ahead. Like, so for instance, as I mentioned, I was a VP for a computer memory company, and I was so good at hiding it. Again, my then VP argued with the police that it can't possibly be Doug who was driving and caused this accident. So some will say, hey, I am high functioning. I do have other successes in life. This was a company, by the way, that at its peak was about 250 employees doing $300 million in sales. So not a decent sized company. This was a company that I went from box boy to VP in 5 years. So that's, relatively unheard of. I mean, I reported directly to the owners. There was nobody higher in the organization at that time than me. And so, I could have shown and used as an example, but look at the success that's happening in my life.
Right.
But it's still a lie. It's a lie in the sense that, but you have other deficiencies or other issues in your life that you could be doing so much better if you weren't, using and abusing some of these substances. Now, what I would also like to say, by the way, is just because I'm an alcoholic in recovery, I don't believe that everybody who drinks is an alcoholic, So, I want to put that out there because some people think, that, hey, he's going to just go to the extreme and label everybody as an addict or an alcoholic. I don't look at it as that way. But, some of my background too, I was a basketball coach for a number of years. I coached my son's YMCA basketball team for 4 years. I was also a gymnastics coach when I was in a high school, and I love seeing people realize their potential when you see this growth.
Right.
And I've seen it from my own life. I've seen it from the lives of people that I work with in my recovery program, and I've seen it also just in other personal situations where, using and abusing these substances are just holding people back.
Yeah.
Even if they don't get addicted. But that's the gamble that a lot of us take. We always think it's going to be somebody else.
Right.
I didn't think it was going to be me. Again, I grew up in a great family. I kind of joke, my parents are like Ward and June Cleaver. I've seen, my parents drink one time in their whole life, and yet I became a binge drinking alcoholic and lost a younger brother to an OD. So, what we gamble with is very unfortunate, and the substances that are out on the streets today are even more deadly.
Yeah. Well, I think that interesting comment that you make, that that it doesn't matter the stereotype that we look at, this is the alcoholic or this is the drug addict or the heroin addict. It doesn't apply. I mean, these people, like you said, there are children, there are neighbors, there are firefighters, they are our police officers, they are our doctors, they are our pilots.
They are.
It's all through society. There is no barrier. There's no income barrier or professional barrier when it comes to addiction.
Well, in a similar way. So my dad's a type 1 diabetic. I have other family members who were type 1 diabetics, and that would be like saying, hey, I'm looking at a crowd, pick the type 1 diabetic out of the crowd.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
it doesn't
good
work.
luck. Yeah.
So let's talk about MATForce. Let's
Excellent.
talk about your ambassadorship. Is that
sure? That sounds good. Yeah, I'm part of the ambassador program.
Yeah, there you go.
And actually on a couple of other committees as well relative to MATForce. I'm a kind of a relatively new member. I was blessed. Your wife actually introduced me to Mary Lee Fowler, who is the executive director of MATForce. And Mary Lee and I met about a month ago. And this was after I posted something. I went back to upstate New York, where I went to high school. And I spoke at my high school there, and I posted something about it. And your wife saw it because she's also, is a volunteer at MATForce as well, and said, "Hey, we think you would be great here," because she also knows me from the committee that you and I were on together. Right. And so Mary Lee and I met. Now, what I will say too is, I don't jump into things lightly. If I'm going to attach my name to something, if I'm going to attach my organization's name potentially to something, and if I'm also, going to take my time, I want to make sure that this is something that aligns with my values, my beliefs, and things of that nature. And I was highly impressed with the conversation that I had with Mary Lee. And so it originally started off where she was kind of asking if I could be a part of the ambassador program, but MATForce is so much more than that. MATForce has a number of different organizations. There's steering committees, which I'm now part of the Prescott steering committee. There's other things like the Reentry Project Planning Committee for people who are coming out of jails and how to reenter the workforce and society in a healthy way. There's a pharmacy team, which I've also been a part of. There's an underage drinking task force. There is Partners in Prevention Speaking Bureau as well. There's an overdose committee, pharmacy committee, different things of that nature. So MATForce really gets into a lot of things. And again, I signed on to a couple of the other committees in addition to being an ambassador. And an ambassador is like anything else. You're a representative and you're going out into the community to do different things like this interview. And I just want to make sure I'm a really good representative for MATForce, because I do believe in what MATForce is trying to accomplish and really trying to do some good work.
Well, you make me chuckle a little bit, because knowing you and getting to know you, you don't do things slowly. You're right there. You're 100% in.
That's right.
And I think, again, knowing you personally, MATForce is very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
I think you are a great person, a great speaker, and will do them well to have you do shows like this and be out there and be the face of MATForce as an ambassador. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So do you now, I know my wife goes to schools and she talks to children and she does different events like that. And then, if there's, when they had the city hall meeting in PV on fentanyl, she manned a table and gave out information about different drug problems. Is that something that you do, Doug? Do you go and speak to kids, or do you speak speak to the adult community? Or
I will be. Again, I'm relatively new to the MATForce team, about a month in, so I've gone to a couple of the meetings just to, again, see the other people that are involved. And you know, one of the great things about MATForce is to see how the community is coming together. And this is seeing people from law enforcement, people from the health department, people that are medical professionals, other people who are participating in recovery centers and things of that nature, all coming together to try to help with this mission. One of the things that I am going to be doing and stepping in on is speaking at schools. So I've done that just as, you know, prior to coming into MATForce, like I mentioned. I went out to go talk at the Jesuit high school that I went to in upstate New York. I've spoken locally at North Point a couple of times, and so I really enjoy getting the message out there to the kids in the community. This last week, there was also a proclamation at Prescott City Hall for the Stand With Me, Be Drug Free week, and so I was there with two other representatives from MATForce to participate in that, which was great. So yes, I planned. I should be doing more of those things.
Oh, fantastic! And speaking of Be With Me Drug Free, Be Drug Free, that event, the walk starts this Saturday, I believe.
So there is an event that MATForce is sponsoring. The typical slogan is Stand With Me, Be Drug Free. This slogan for this event is Walk With Me, Be Drug Free, which is a 1 mile family fun walk that is at Mortimer Farms. It's tomorrow, March 2nd at 10 a.m. And Mortimer Farms is out in Dewey for anybody that doesn't know. It's kind of close to where the corner of the 69 and the 169 are. And they're going to have different children activities, family fun activities, hot chocolate, different things of that nature. And part of it is the awareness aspect. Part of it is also to celebrate. You know, we hear a lot in the news about the arrests and the overdose deaths and other negative aspects that go on within our community. And some of what MATForce does is to celebrate, you know what, not everybody is on drugs or alcohol, and let's celebrate that. And so, yes, that's going on again tomorrow, Saturday, March 2nd at Mortimer Farms, starting at 10 a.m.
Now, as far as people that do show up there, you're going to be there. I'm sure MATForce will be there in force. How about some of our legislators, our mayors, our city council people? Are you aware of anybody who's going to be there as far as representing the cities or communities?
You know, I don't have that list, and I actually may not be able to go because I may be leaving today or early tomorrow morning to go do an intervention. So, you know, I get I've got a couple other things unfortunately going on as well. But you know, I know it's been put out there to a number again of law enforcement individuals, other people who are in the county attorney's office, different people involved with schools and things of that nature. So really just trying to get the word out there. And so, yeah.
So if we have anybody out there who can answer that question, please type that your answer into the field, and we'll be able to advise the public who will be at that walk. I think last year, I know multiple MATForce representatives were there.
Yes.
I believe our representatives were there, both David Stringer and Noel Campbell, and I'm not sure who else might have been there, but that's a good deal.
Yeah.
So, you know, Doug, a couple things that we wanted to talk about. First of all, fentanyl, the problem that we have within our community with what's going on. I mean, you know, drugs today aren't like they were in our generation. A lot of people would try something and say, no, that's not for me, or wind up with a problem.
Right.
Today, they try it and they die.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's bring that on the table a little bit. Let's talk about the problems that we have within our own community with these. And I saw something on Facebook that you put on there. M30s, they look kind of like a Percocet, but they're death in a pill.
That's right. And so if you recall, when we sat on Mayor Oberg's ad hoc committee for oversight of the structured sober living homes, I know one of the presentations was from a PANT officer, undercover officer, and that was like 2016, maybe early 2017 when he presented to us, and he was mentioning at that time what they were seeing relative to counterfeit prescription medications that were being produced in China,
Right.
that were laced with fentanyl, that were coming up through Mexico, and us being a border state.
Yeah.
A lot was coming into our area, and it's extremely toxic. If you were to see the amount of fentanyl that it takes for somebody to OD on, it's relatively equivalent to like 3 to 5 grains of table salt.
Right.
It really isn't that much.
Right.
And it is so caustic that actually even first responders who are going to an OD situation, if they don't take the proper precautions to cover themselves, in certain cases, first responders touch an individual and they can go into overdose,
Right.
and then need to be revived as well. And so, yeah, some of it is coming in the form of what are counterfeit prescription medications. And so people buy stuff off the streets and think that, hey, it's no big deal. This has been produced in a controlled environment, and
Right.
it has
They're
not
not.
been.
Yeah.
And so it is like playing Russian roulette. And in other cases, actually, they are also showing where they're finding it in cocaine.
Right.
They're finding it sometimes laced in different forms of marijuana and things of that nature. And so it is a big gamble out there. And so, fentanyl is 80 to 100 times more potent than morphine. And they've actually also produced carfentanil, which is about 80 to 100 times more potent than fentanyl. And so what's out there today, like you said, is significantly different than when I was using drugs, when I was younger.
Yeah, and another thing I learned about at the town hall meeting, one of the pant officers were there as well, and they were talking about the use of Narcan.
Yes.
And fentanyl is so strong that that they administer Narcan to somebody who's overdosing.
Right.
And they'll start coming out of it, and then they'll go right back into the overdose, and they have to administer more
Multiple
Narcan.
times.
So it's like it doesn't go away. It's like it just keeps on, like if you will, a wave hitting you of this toxicity. So
well, and part of the problem too is some people think, hey, if I can just revive myself with Narcan, I'm fine, and you need to go to the ER after you've been revived, because it is not a cure-all. It is to revive you and bring you out of it, but you do need to go then seek a medical attention.
Yeah. Yeah, and interesting, at the same meeting, we were talking about Narcan, and it's available. I mean, it's available to the public if you have somebody who lives around you in your home that you believe that you should have Narcan on site. You're able to get that right at the health department.
You can get it at a variety of different places. People used to think that they could only get it with a prescription. That's not true.
Right.
Us as a licensed treatment facility, and I have a registered structured sober living home here with the city. We have it on site for our patients, and I was able to buy it at CVS without a prescription.
Oh, okay.
So you can do that as well. You can get it at different pharmacies, but health departments and other places sometimes also have it available to be able to distribute. And
then the most common is a nasal spray, if I recall.
Correct. Yeah, there's different. You can either do it through a nasal spray or you can do it with an injection. A lot of treatment centers don't like to do it with the injection method, partially because have a lot of IV users who are triggered just simply by needles.
Yeah.
And so, but you can get some basic training. It's relatively easy to administer, and definitely can be life-saving.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the things, and I'm a Facebooker, I'll admit it.
Yeah.
And I get in a lot of conversations around the community
Okay.
about marijuana.
Yeah.
And it seems that a lot of people, there's no more fence sitters on this issue. They're either for it or they're against it. And many people look at both recreational marijuana as well as marijuana used for medical purposes.
Yeah.
Wanted to open that door to your conversation.
Yeah, that's a big conversation, and you're right. People are becoming more and more divided as far as should we have it medicinally? Should we have it recreationally? And the belief of whether, hey, it's no big deal. Nobody's ever died or had any issues from using marijuana, so on and so forth. And, one of the things that I love about MATForce is MATForce doesn't want to just put the emotion or what we, out there. It's more so about, well, what do the studies show? What are we seeing out there? Yes, it is true that marijuana is not as addictive as heroin. But to use that as why it's no big deal is glossing over a lot of the other issues that are out there. I was doing some reading, obviously, for a treatment center, but also for MATForce. Psychiatric Times, which is a publication out there that talks about various psychiatric issues, had some reports on seeing the rise of cannabis use, seeing also the rise of correlations between cannabis consumption and drug-induced psychoses. Also between the rise of states that have legalized it and seeing ER-related issues to marijuana. And so, to just simply gloss over it and say it's no big deal is really a dangerous thing to do. And so, I don't think people even really realize, so how did heroin come around? Opium has been around for thousands of years. And we then developed an opium addiction and opium issues. We were seeing it in opium dens and that back in the 1800s. And so morphine was produced. And morphine was produced to use as a substance to help people get off of opium. And they said at that time there's no addictive properties to morphine. And they found out that they were wrong. And now we had a morphine problem. So in the late 1800s, Bayer was the first pharmaceutical company to commercially produce heroin. And so then they used heroin as a way to try to get people off of morphine, not realizing, again, the addictive issues and properties of heroin. And so, obviously we see it today. My father fought in Vietnam. My grandfather fought in Vietnam as well. And so in a roughly 10-year war, we lost about 58,000 U.S. service members. In 2017, we lost over 72,000 people to a drug overdose, just in 1 year to drug overdose. And that doesn't take into consideration then also people who may have passed from a DUI or other drug-related crimes or things of that nature. And so to say we have an epidemic, we have an epidemic. And unfortunately, whether there's financial reasons behind it or people just want to, okay, we have one problem, let's substitute it with another substance without really fully understanding what they're substituting it with, and not realizing, hey, we are creating other problems. The other thing that we also have to watch is obviously like the Walk With Me, Be Drug Free that's going on tomorrow at Mortimer Farms. Part of this is how are we educating and what are we saying to our kids? And there are studies that show that the human brain doesn't stop developing until about 25, and in some cases, some studies will show 30. There have been studies that show that early consumption of it and consistent consumption of it can lead to then long-term issues of depression, long-term issues of anxiety, and other issues. And so, now we're kind of saying it's okay, and our kids are seeing us say it's okay. And so they think it's no big deal. Well, part of the issue, so as I mentioned, I started using marijuana when I was 15 years old. So that was back in 85. I used it somewhat on a consistent basis up until the early 90s. The marijuana that I smoked back then is not the marijuana that's around today. They've done studies on the marijuana that has been seized by the DEA in different drug raids, and they're seeing that when they test that marijuana, and this is relatively recently, that the levels of THC have gone up 3 to 4 times, if not higher. And what they're also seeing is that the CBD components, which can sometimes also be used for other issues like pain, pain management and other things of that nature.
That's the CBD oil that you see a lot on.
Exactly. And that concentration has gone down. And so, the marijuana that kids that are available to people today is not close to the same that maybe older siblings or parents may have used in the past.
Right. It's like, and somebody told me it was like a lot of times 70% stronger. It's been hybrided. The plants have been hybrided to bring up the THC levels to the levels that they are today.
That's right.
And then if the product itself, the plant, isn't bad enough, then you have edibles.
That's right.
You've got oils, and I think that's where a lot of people miss the boat on the dangers of having that stuff around your house. We go back and we look at Colorado, and you look at the statistics that are coming out of Colorado. Colorado being one of the first states to legalize marijuana within their state. And you see the hospital calls, how fast they've risen. You also see underage use. It's like,
that's right.
I believe last time I looked, Colorado was the #1 state in the union for underage use of marijuana. It's relatively available. I mean, I got into a conversation with somebody that said, well, you can get, if a young person wants to get marijuana, they can find it. And that's probably true. You could probably find it somewhere. But when it's on the corner...
Well, it's easier to find when you put it out there so much.
But when it's on the corner like a gas station, and it's right there, it's easy. And then you get a lot of the people that come back and say, well, what about alcohol? Well, what about alcohol? And so we want to open Pandora's box and put another item out there to do what alcohol's done to our communities and our families. So
a couple of things. I kind of went over a kind of thumbnail sketch on the evolution of how heroin came to be, with saying that again, people that are advocates or proponents or in favor of the legalization of marijuana will say, well, you're comparing apples and oranges. And so again, I'll say, yes, I am not saying that marijuana is as addictive as heroin, but that doesn't mean that marijuana does not have its issues. Part of the question relative to opioid prescription medications, which is what I lost my brother to, is... First off, we had an overprescription problem.
Right.
I mean, it was used for, you have this? Here's some opioid-based pain meds. Oh, you have that issue? Here's some opioid-based pain meds. And so, and what was considered to be medically appropriate for a short-term prescription, and then have the patient or individual come back in and be reevaluated to see, do they still need to be on it, versus what ended up happening is then unfortunately, there was a lot of inappropriate prescribing going on, where people would get anywhere from a 30 to 90 day supply of opioid-based pain meds. And so, if the need then, let's say, went away in 30 days, they were given 90 days. Now they've got a whole nother 60 days supply sitting in the medicine cabinet. And so, how much do then kids have the availability of, like, hey, I can go in mom and dad's medicine cabinet, or grandma or grandpa's medicine cabinet, and I can go get a hold of it. And so that's part of where we have to watch, where we're, what I saw initially being a treatment center owner is how easily people could go get a medicinal marijuana card. And it was just given away for, what do you have? Okay, here you go. It was like a catch-all for everything, versus something that was being focused, that was used for very intentional purposes, whether it was for seizures, pain management, or whatever the case may be. And then also taking a look at, are there other appropriate ways for dealing with pain? That's one of the reasons why we also have had a number of people who have become addicted to various substances, is because they didn't have appropriate mental health or medical care or management, pain management in cases, that they went out and they just self-medicated. And so, part of my concern is how freely we are just kind of now making marijuana as kind of the catch-all. Hey, it's kind of like watching sometimes the snake oil salesmen from the past. What do you have? Okay, here you go ahead. And that's not to say that there aren't some specific applications for it. There are. But we as a society just, make it way too readily available.
Well, yeah, and you bring up the opioids. A lot of the kids knew, and I go by the experience of my son. He knew exactly what to tell the doctor. I got an ache here, I got it there, and they'd give him an opioid, and and the addiction would keep on going. And then where I worked, we actually had a pharmacy, so I got to see firsthand, the 90-day prescription for oxycodone. And a lot of times the pharmacist, thank goodness, would say, I'm not going to fill this. They always have the option to fill in it. And they know, this is the doctor who's giving out these prescriptions, drugs, and the kids that are getting them filled are just selling them out on the street.
Yes.
So they start out with the oxycodone, and they say, and again, I one of the things I always heard was, well, it's prescribed by a doctor. It's got to be okay, Then they get hooked, and then the next thing you know, they got a needle in their arm because, when we were doing our ad hoc committee, I believe it was about $5 a hit for heroin on the street.
Oh, it got extremely cheap.
Yeah, so it was like cheaper than a beer,
right?
And then we wonder why we have the issues and the problems,
right?
But one of the things you brought up, Doug, and I want to bring this out to anybody who's listening: the medicine cabinet.
Yes.
Boy, I'll tell you, if there was anything people come and say, Glenn, what would you do different? And, I don't have the answer. I wish I had the code. As the ad hoc committee, we would have people come in and the families would say, what do I do? And it's heartbreaking because I didn't know,
Right.
And quite honestly, I would go to you because you were the expert, on the recovery scene. But if I was to do everything over again, and if you're listening to this, parents, get those drugs out of that cabinet because those kids know exactly where it's at, and they're going to experiment with them if that's what they want to do, and that's a relatively available drug, and that's where it all starts. And if you're a grandparent who's had some kind of pain medication in the past, and you're not using that anymore, take it down to the local police departments. The police department will take it. They'll MATForce runs program where you can turn your drugs in that you're not using any longer, and they'll have them destroyed. And so,
which is a great point, by the way, to go back to what you were saying relative to the edibles.
Right.
If you have the edibles around, and now it even looks in a friendlier format,
right? And
for younger people then to possibly consume those. Again, we're just potentially increasing risk.
Right. Well, and you look at the edibles online, they look like Snicker bars and they look like Hershey bars, and they come up with some kind of catchy little phrase of what they may be calling them or what have you.
Right.
And again, the statistics don't lie. And the poison centers and the ER rooms in Colorado have had a huge increase of young people getting into this stuff and children who have no idea, they think it's a gummy bear, and they eat it, and next thing you know, they're in some kind of convulsion and they're on their way to the ER. And no, they don't usually die, because a lot of the things I hear out there is, well, nobody's died of marijuana, no, they don't die, but they sure get poisoned from it. I'm not so sure, and I'm looking at your face, and I know what you're ready to say, but I want to say it first. When they say nobody's ever died of marijuana, I would challenge that as well.
I think if you go out and take a look at, somebody who may have passed from a driving accident while on marijuana or other possible situations. We're making way too light of this substance and its use, and I also see I'll have people say, nobody ever has to go to a treatment center for marijuana. And I'm thinking, do you own a treatment center? Because I do. Again, we have Recovery in the Pines and Spartan Recovery. And I have had people in my program solely for use of marijuana. Mm-hmm. And so when people tell me that can't be possible, I see how people have altered their life, who have thrown away possibility, who have thrown away potential, who have increased in depression, who have increased in anxiety, who have increased in other mental health issues from marijuana usage. Mm-hmm. So, mine isn't a feeling, mine is an opinion. I've worked with that firsthand.
Right. And I've seen it too. I've gone to the meetings where recovery people have come up and said, a lot of people will use marijuana and think nothing of it.
Right.
And the person who's in recovery will say, hey, I did it and I couldn't wait to do it again.
Right.
So it affects people in different ways and different, and again, it's indiscriminate who you are and
That's
what
right.
you do.
That's right.
It's going to be the way it affects you.
That's
so
right.
the question is, as society, okay, so do we open up Pandora's box? And even though there's only a slight amount of people who get addicted,
Right.
and say, oh, that's acceptable. It's
Right.
acceptable to allow 50,000 people get addicted within America. To me, that's unacceptable. And
again, like I used as the statistic, again, my father fought and my grandfather fought in Vietnam, over roughly about a 10-year time frame when the United States was involved in Vietnam. We lost about 58,000 people just in 2017 alone to drug overdoses. We lost far more than that. So, what we're gambling with is we as a society better wake up. And some of it, again, obviously it is very tragic when you see somebody who overdoses and dies. I know 2 people recently who overdosed and died. And yet, what I also see, because like I mentioned before, just in my treatment program, I've had people in their 60s in my treatment program. Right. And it's like, how many years of torture did you go through where either life wasn't as good as it could get, or you're dealing with other issues of anxiety and depression and things of that nature that, life could have been so much better. I mean, I know it from my own personal experience. Again, I was a binge drinking alcoholic for 12 to 13 years. Again, yes, I used other substances, marijuana, cocaine, nitrous oxide, and things of that nature. I've now been sober for 21 years. If sobriety wasn't significantly better, I'd just go back to drinking again. I've just seen how much better my life has gotten, and I just really, that's why I also love going out and talking to kids and schools and things of that nature to make them aware, because like you said, clear the stuff out of the medicine cabinet. Again, if somebody had a 90-day supply and they have all these other prescriptions, and if they don't go turn it into the police department or to other appropriate ways of disposing it, some of that stuff just finds its way out on the streets. And like we talked about earlier, now you have those counterfeit prescription medications that are coming in that are mingled in, and now you're just taking a gamble. You don't know.
You literally got a bomb on your hands.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's go back to MATForce for a moment.
Excellent.
And let's talk about anybody who may be listening to this saying, well, what can I do? Can I get involved with this? What can I do to help my community with this problem, and maybe joining MATForce and talking to those folks to see what they can do. As parents, I mean, there's a lot of people that I talk to who go, man, I got some free time and I know this is a problem in our community and we want to get involved.
So, MATForce takes a multiple approach. MATForce does get involved with trying to help lawmakers, as we saw with Noel Campbell and what he was doing relative to the sober living bill at that time, to try to influence laws that are healthy for Arizona. MATForce gets out there and does things relative to education, prevention, and other areas. So there's multiple ways that people can get involved with MATForce. Now, some may be, hey, it can be come out to the walk.
Yeah.
Show your support in that. You don't have to you don't have to be a MATForce ambassador or a MATForce member to participate in this. Bring the family out, bring the kids out. Again, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, March 2nd at Mortimer Farms. And Mortimer Farms is a beautiful property. It's a great place. It's a great place to go to. They do a lot of different things. So, it could be participating in that. If you're a business owner, there are different signs and things that you can hang in your business to say, hey, you're in support of a drug-free environment. Right. Like your wife, and it can be a volunteer and get involved in different aspects. And like I mentioned earlier in the show, there's a number of different committees to get involved with, because substance abuse and addiction, I don't know that I've met anybody who's an adult that can't say they don't know anybody that has a substance abuse issue or has passed from it or had legal issues from it or whatever. I mean, it is so invasive that there again, yeah, you could reach out to MATForce and say, hey, I would love to volunteer. And we've got a number of different opportunities. Actually, MATForce is hiring right now too, by the way. So if somebody's looking for a job, unless they just recently filled it, but there's some need for some administrative help and things of that nature. So again, participate in the events. You can post the signs. You can help get the word out there. You can come volunteer in one of the many committees. There's a number of different ways to get involved with MATForce.
And it's always neat because when I go to one of these stores, and I'm a Second Amendment guy, so I visit gun stores, and so and I work
too,
at,
by the way,
and I work at Prescott Gun Club.
Yeah,
and,
I know you do. Yeah,
we have a sign that says this is a drug-free area, and it's
excellent.
something that MATForce brought in.
Yep.
I actually went to Macy's back a while back to
Yeah,
get some
in
medical.
Chino Valley.
To get some medical equipment, and they have a poster there from the early days of MATForce, when it was really focusing on the meth problem that was going on.
And that's how it originated.
And that's how it originated. And they had one of the original signs up in their building. And my wife was with me and went, "Whoa, I need to take a picture of that and send it back to the ladies of MATForce."
Having trading cards or something like
exactly.
that, like baseball
what
cards
do you have,
when we were kids. Yeah.
Well, Doug, is there anything else that you might want to wrap up with and speak about? I think we really hit a lot of important issues today, especially with our problems that we're looking at today. And of course, how about if anybody wanted to get a hold of you and needed to talk to you about an issue or have a question about the show today? That they might want to get your opinion on. I mean, you are, you're expert in the field, in my opinion, and
I appreciate that.
You are a resource that any parent would be. I can tell you from experience. Would love to talk to you about.
Well, and I appreciate that, Glenn. My partner Albert Black, who is my partner at Recovery in the Pines and Spartan Recovery, he and I both. We'll get calls to do interventions and people will ask us, how much are you going to charge? And it's like, just let us show up. Let us come talk to you. Let us get out there. So if you wanted to reach out to me, there's a couple of different ways that you can get a hold of me. You could get a hold of me through MATForce. The email at MATForce would be matforce@cableone.net. You could also call MATForce at 928-708-0100, or you can get a hold of me through Recovery in the Pines. My cell number is 928-910-9608, or my email, which is dougdolan@recoveryinthepines.com. Just a couple of quick closing things, if you don't mind, Glenn.
You bet.
First off, thank you very much for this opportunity, because this is another way to get the message out there, and hopefully challenge some people to think. I would really love to challenge people to go get information. Don't just go off of the feelings, or just don't go off of kind of the whims of society or what society says is okay. Go out and do some research for yourself. You'll find the statistics out there, like we're talking about marijuana, because that's a booming one, as we talked about earlier right now. And the general conversation that you'll hear out there is it's no big deal. And I challenge you to go do the research. And if you think you are struggling or think that you're having issues, please, please, please reach out to somebody for help. I didn't for a period of time because I was ashamed. I wanted to try to do it on my own. And that would be like me, again, my dad's a type 1 diabetic. My dad's saying, well, I want to cure myself of type 1 diabetes. That's not a healthy way of doing it, right? There is no shame in this, and you don't know who it's going to get a hold of. And if you are struggling, or if you see the signs of a loved one that you think are struggling, please, please, please reach out for help.
Okay, great message. Okay, I'm going to give you 1, 2, go grab a pen, grab a pencil, grab a piece of paper. One more time, Doug.
Sure.
Give me the phone number to MATForce and give me the phone and your phone number. So you kind of went through those quickly. And, being a guy out there listening to radio, and I want to call in, and they give off the name and the number really quick, and then I don't grab it in time. So one more time, if
it's
you
kind
will.
of like Joey Zuzu from the old commercials, and how quickly you could speed
how fast
through
we
that.
can go through.
Right. So the number for MATForce is 928-708-0100, and my personal cell phone is 928-910-9608.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Glenn.
Lynn, any questions at all out there yet, or We're about ready to wrap this up. So, are we all good? We good? All right. Doug, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for everything you do for our community.
Sure. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Take care.